Before I say anything else in this video, I want to start off with a quote from Deborah Tate, who is the only surviving sister of Sharon Tate, and this quote is from when she saw Margot Robbie's portrayal of her sister in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Quote, "She made me cry because she sounded just like Sharon. The tone in her voice was completely Sharon, and it just touched me so much that big tears started falling. The front of my shirt was wet. I actually got to see my sister again nearly 50 years later. She touched me in a way that convinced me she was Sharon. She did such a damn good job that for me personally, the visit was a little short. I had Sharon back in front of me again, and it was too short a visit." End quote. I want to start off with that quote to sort of set the mood about why this movie is so important to me and so many people, and it's really profound when somebody who has gone through the most unimaginable trauma as Deborah Tate has, to be able to find at least any sort of comfort in a piece of art and a movie is just incredible. It is so hard to accurately portray somebody. What I personally love is, so I've had the absolute privilege of being able to speak with Anthony DeMaria, who is the nephew of Jay Sebring, and who was also killed. He worked incredibly closely with Tarantino for that movie, and as did Deborah, and Margot even wore some of Sharon Tate's actual jewelry to get into character, and to the point that Deborah literally said, "I got to see my sister again 50 years later." Like, that's crazy to have such a profound performance and portrayal of somebody. And that's just one of the many, many reasons I'm obsessed with this movie. But this entire video is for that. So, this is me after I've already filmed the entire video. First of all, I was going to make my Once Upon a Time in Hollywood video, like, right now, but I realized I have too much to say about the actual Manson murders. So I'm making a whole separate video. Second of all, I'm not a true crime YouTuber. If you are looking for like a very detailed, in-depth documentary about either Charles Manson, find something else, because I barely even talk about him because I don't care about him and I don't want to give him attention because I don't care. I'm not a true crime. This is not going to be comprehensive. This is, over the past couple years, I've done a lot of research on my own, and this is literally just off the top of my head, and then also just sort of reading some things that I've written before, some notes and stuff, but I'm literally just winging it. This is not going to be in-depth. This is not a Manson murders documentary. That's not the point. It's just me simply yapping about everything that is up in my little noggin about these victims in this case, just so that we all have a better foundation for my next video. So I wanted to give that disclaimer. Anyways, enjoy the video. I don't think it's really necessary to know like the entire lore of the Manson family and Charles Manson himself in order to understand. Just incredible on Tarantino's part that he put so much effort into making this movie so accurate. Tony, he actually told me that he had one request for Tarantino, and that was two requests, but to not glorify the killers and to pay respect to the victims. Such a touchy subject, especially when you're making a movie about real life tragedies that happen to real people, and the people affected by those tragedies are still roaming this earth, walking around, and they can see everything that people post on social media and everything that is put out into the theaters, and it's really, really disgusting when there's horrible portrayals of this case or of these individuals. So I don't think it's necessarily, you know, the most important thing to fully understand the entire lore of the Manson family and Charles Manson himself, because honestly, it doesn't really matter to me, at least. Like, I don't care about him. Also, like, that's what the movie's based on, so it's nice to have some sort of understanding, and also because there's a lot in this movie that there's a lot that happened revolving around this case in the Manson family that is not included in the movie, which is completely understandable because it didn't really have anything to do with the story or the plot line, but also There's so much footage and deleted scenes from this movie that who knows, it could have been in there, but I guess we'll never know. I don't know, unless he releases it, but I don't know if he will. Anyways, so I will go into detail about things that are completely not even in the movie, don't have anything to do with it, just because I am really passionate about bringing awareness to this case and these victims, because so many of them, people don't even know their names. People don't even know that they exist. It existed. There's potentially 35 victims of the Manson family. We obviously only know of some of them, and those are the only ones that are confirmed, but who knows if there's more, and there probably is. Basically, back in the 1960s in California, there was this old movie ranch called Spawn Ranch, and this little man, and I say he was 5'2", so I'm saying little. This little man, he named Charles Manson. It's the 60s. It was very like counterculture, free-spirited. Drugs were flying around everywhere. Everybody was having sex everywhere. It was the 60s. I'm not calling them this, but I will let Rick Dalton say it for me. They were
these fucking hippie weirdos. They're the fucking hippies.
So basically, he was a very, very manipulative person. So in July of 1969, there was this man named Gary Hinman. He was 34 years old, and he was an amazingly talented musician. He actually performed at Carnegie Hall. He had graduated from UCLA with a degree in chemistry, and he was actually getting his PhD in sociology at the time. He was incredibly, incredibly selfless and incredibly generous. He actually would allow the Manson family members to stay in his house free of charge for, shelter and whatever. And also, he would go out of his way to buy baby formula and diapers for the babies that were being born on the ranch. Just a very, very generous guy. One day he had sold drugs to this man who was a part of the Manson cult. His name is Bobby Bousselet, and I'm probably butchering that last name, so I'm just going to call him Bobby. But Bobby, he had bought drugs off of Gary and had sold them to another individual. The person who had bought them from Bobby apparently complained that they were bad quality. So Bobby goes over to Gary's house, and he asks for the money back. Gary didn't have the money, and so instead of being like, okay, that's fine, like, I'll come back when you have it, Charles was summoned, and he came over with a samurai sword, and for the next couple of days, Gary would actually be tortured by Bobby, and I'm sure Charles had something to do with it too, which is incredibly sad until he ultimately died. I think it was the 27th of July. So Gary is the first known victim of the Manson family. Bobby is serving a life sentence, and he would later go on to say, quote, "Gary was a friend. He didn't do anything to deserve what happened to him, and I'm responsible for that." So, fast forward to August of 1969. I'm going to introduce some people. So there's this woman named Sharon Tate. She was born in Texas, and she moved to California to pursue modeling and acting. She was 8.5 months pregnant with her first child, a baby boy. Her husband was the film director Roman Polanski. In the early days of August 1969, he was out of the country filming a movie, and Sharon, ironically, didn't really feel comfortable staying at their home there in Benedict Canyon on Cielo Drive. She didn't feel comfortable staying there alone, and she, was expecting soon. She was about less than a month away from giving birth and just sort of wanted to have company, and so she had some people staying with her. Those people were the couple Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski. Wojtek is originally from Poland. He wanted to become a screenwriter, and he had some small credits, And then Abigail, she's often just described as being a coffee heiress because it's that Folger, like she is part of that Folger Folger Coffee, whatever, you know what I mean? The Folger Coffee place company. The Folger, that's like her dad or grandpa or someone, you know. But she was more than that, obviously. She was very, very fashionable. She loved fashion. She loved art. She was smart. And she was dating Wojtek at the time, and actually it was just a couple days before her 26th birthday when shit happened. The other person staying with them was a man named Jay Sebring. He was a 35-year-old Hollywood hairstylist. He's often regarded as being like the first male hairstylist. Like before him, people weren't really like styling men's hair for, you know, or like, you know, in the way that they do now, especially within Hollywood and for movies and such. So he really, really started like an empire with that. And hey guys, Editing Emma here. I don't know when I'm gonna upload this video, but it's currently about 9 p.m. on October 10th, which is would have been Jay's 91st birthday. I doubt I'll get it uploaded tonight, but if I don't, the thought was there, and if I do, then that's my little tribute to Mr. Sebring. So, yeah, don't know when this will get uploaded, but happy birthday! He was incredibly talented. He actually dated Sharon. I think they were engaged for a time, but they ended up breaking up, and they still remained really, really good friends. So in the early days of August 1969, there's pictures of them, and they're just, you know, hanging out in the house. They're doing whatever, just living their lives. Everything's fine. So also, I need to introduce another character. So Terry Melcher is the son of the singer Doris Day. He was a record producer. Charles Manson was a wannabe musician. He does have some music out there. Like, apparently had, you know, discussed being signed to this record deal, like having this record deal with Terry Melcher, and ultimately Terry turned him down or didn't do the deal or something of the sort. It ended up not happening. Actually, Terry, he was living for a time in the house that Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate were currently occupying on Cielo Drive. Charles knew that he wasn't there anymore because there was a time where he did go to the house and was confronted, and they were like, hey, you know, he doesn't live here anymore.
This is Shaggy, asshole.
Hello, can I help you?
Oh, yeah, hey, man, I'm looking for Terry. I'm a friend of Terry's and Dennis Wilson's.
Well, Terry and Candy don't live here anymore. This is the Polanski residence now.
Really? He moved? Dang!
So he obviously knew. I think he needed some place to take his anger out, because he was a whiny little man who didn't get a record deal. So, on the night of August 8th, Sharon, Jay, Abigail, and Wojtek were all hanging out in the house on Cielo Drive. I also have another character to introduce. So there's this 18-year-old boy named Stephen Parent. He was very, very smart. He loved electronics. He loved making electronics. He spent so much time in his youth just like taking things apart and figuring them out. One day, he was driving around and he picked up a hitchhiker named William Garretson and took him back home. William Garretson was actually the caretaker of the Cielo Drive estate where Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski were living. He lived in like a little house behind it. And so that's where he was dropped back off, and William was like, hey, like, if you ever want to come back for a beer or whatever, feel free, you know, like, come over whenever. So one day, on the night, unfortunately, on the night of August 8th, Stephen, like I said, he really liked electronics, and he started to make clocks and radios. On the night of August 8th, he decided to head over to the house and meet up with William to try and sell him a radio. And ultimately, William wasn't interested in the radio. He offered Stephen to stay over and have a beer. So Stephen did, and at the same time, just, you know, in the house in front of that, Sharon Abigail, Jay, and Wojtek were just hanging out. Abigail was actually talking on the phone with her mom about her birthday that was 2 days away. She was about to turn 26, and they actually made plans for her birthday. So, ultimately, Steven is about to leave, and it's the early morning hours of August 9th. He's offered one more beer, so he stays for one more beer, which unfortunately would seal his fate. He stays for the other beer, he gets in his car, and he starts trying to drive away. Unfortunately, at that exact same time, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian were pulling up to the house. What they were told, might I remind you that this is the house that Terry Melcher once lived in. Charles knew that Terry was no longer living there, but this man-child, I guess, just needed to take the anger and the resentment out. He had sent his little minions, Tex, Susan, Patricia, and Linda, to kill everyone inside the house. Ultimately, they were given the instructions to kill everyone in the house. So Steven was leaving the house. Unfortunately, that was his fate. So Tex gets out of the car and he shoots him point blank, and Steven wasn't found until the next morning, slumped over in his father's car, right at the entrance of the Cielo Drive estate. Linda stays watch, and Susan, Patricia, and Tex, they go in, and true to the movie, Tex Watson says,
"I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business."
So they walk in, and Abigail and Wojtek actually were able to escape, but they were chased down and killed, and then everybody was gathered into the living room. I don't think it's right to be entertained or to treat people's deaths and tragedies as, like stories. So I'm not gonna go into all of the detail about what was done to them, but it was heinous, it was disgusting, it was torturous, and unfortunately, so Jay Sebring, he actually died while defending Sharon and while protecting her, and Sharon unfortunately was the last person to be killed that night, and she actually offered herself as a hostage until she had her baby, and then she said that they could kill her after, which is so gut-wrenching, but also it goes to show the person she was and also the mother she would have been, because this baby is not even born yet and she is laying down her life. She is offering up herself to be a hostage, to be tortured and to be held by these people until she gives birth, and then be viciously murdered by them just so that her baby could live. I'm a huge fan of Sharon Tate. I love her. And if I ever had to describe her to somebody, I think I'd use that. So I'm not going to go into detail about their injuries. It's all, you can find the actual crime scene photos and the autopsy photos. It's not even hard to find it. I think it was Susan that did it. She took Sharon's blood and wrote "pig" on the wall. Which is disgusting. That happened, and then they left, and it wasn't until the next morning when Steven's body was found initially, and then the absolute unthinkable was found inside that house. In the early morning hours of August 9th, 1969, 18-year-old Steven Parent, 32-year-old Wojtek Rakowski, 25-year-old Abigail Folter, 2 days away from her 26th birthday, 35-year-old Jay Sebring, 26-year-old Sharon Tate, and her unborn child, Paul Richard Polanski, were all senselessly killed by the Manson family at the request of Charles Manson himself. They were not done. The next night, enter Rosemary and Leno LaBianca. They were a couple living in California. Rosemary was described as fashionable, stylish, and kind-hearted. She opened up her own high-end fashion boutique that she had co-founded that was very successful. Her husband, Lino LaBianca, he actually served in World War II for 18 months, so thank you, sir, for your service. So he was very smart. He was a great father by all accounts, and they were just sort of living their lives. The next night, the same 4 individuals who were at Cielo Drive the night before, as well as Charles himself, Leslie Van Houten and Steve Grogan. Leslie, unfortunately, was just released on parole last summer, which is disgusting, arrived at the LaBianca's house in Los Angeles, California, and they all arrived there, but Manson ended up leaving with some of them, and the ones that remained were Tex Watson, of course, again, Patricia Krenwinkel from the night before, and also Leslie Van Houten. The crimes and the what was inflicted upon Rosemary and Lino it's disgusting. They both had been, they both had children from previous marriages, and so they sort of blended their family when they got together. All I want to say is a quote from Lino's daughter, Corey. It reads, "Maybe Leslie Van Houten has been a model prisoner, but you know what? We still suffer our loss. My father will never be paroled. My stepmother will never get her life back." And I think that is so important to remember, that these people can be paroled. They can get a second chance at their life, but the lives that they took and the life that they robbed of ever even being born, they can't be paroled. There is one more known murder of the Manson family, and honestly, as I'm continuing this, I genuinely think I'm going to split this up into 2 videos. Like, one video is like the lore behind the Manson family, just to pay respect to the victims, and then the other is about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I've been talking for so fucking long, and I feel like I need to separate this, so I'm probably going to make 2 separate videos. But the last known murder to be committed by the Manson family was of Donald Shea. He had the nickname of Shorty, which was ironic because he was very tall. He was just doing everything. He was a stunt man. He also worked at Spawn Ranch, so that's where that connection sort of comes in. He was I'm gonna have to read this. He was a 4-man ranch hand, horse wrangler, and bouncer of the ranch, while being an actor and a stuntman. August 16th, 1969, there was a huge police raid at the ranch, and Manson became convinced that it was Donald, or Shorty, who called the police, and also he just had this disdain for him because the woman he married was black, and he was racist, so he took that out on him, I guess. So once again, little Charles orders the death of him, and actually wouldn't be found until 8 years later, which is really sad to think about. His kid and his ex-wife and his family and his loved ones not knowing where he was all that time, and then to find out he met such a violent end is horrific. He was only 35 years old. That is actually the last known victim of the Manson family, and I have realized that I can talk for way too long, so I'm probably going to make a separate video all about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is sort of just like the background of what's included in the movie and what's not included in the movie, because so many of these victims and people and their stories just aren't talked about, like, at all. People don't even know who they are. So I think I'm just going to use my opportunity to talk about it and why I love this movie so much and how it bleeds into real life as well. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video and listening to these victims and their stories. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!